Hello, this is Kathryn Freeman with the Nolan Consulting Group. Today's date is April 13th, 2020, and we wanted to take a couple of minutes to go through the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and how it will impact or could impact the businesses that we work with in the consulting group. The Families First Coronavirus Response Act was signed on March 18th and has an effective date of April 1st of this year. It is unique in a family leave policy in that it sunsets on December 31st, 2020. So these are some short-term coronavirus responses that the House, Senate, and President acted upon in order to make sure that employees had benefits that extended beyond what a small business might be able to provide. The act itself is written for those businesses who are under 500 employees, and there are some very minor stipulations or exceptions that can be looked at for businesses that have less than 25 employees. Those exceptions are very small. And for the purposes of our conversation here, I'm not going to touch on them because we don't know that there would be really many opportunities for the businesses that we work with to file for those exemptions. It does go into effect on April 1st, and part of the law itself is written so that any business that is making a good faith effort to fall in line with these standards would not find themselves in any kind of legal trouble because they know that it was very hastily written and put into play. And as a result, a lot of businesses are having some difficulty understanding exactly what they're responsible for. If you had to shut your doors prior to the April 1st shutoff, or if your business was reduced to the extent that you've got people who are laid off and collecting unemployment, they would not be qualified. They would not qualify for either of these two components. So if you're closed already and people are on unemployment, or if there are other things out there, this is not going to be in effect for them. There are, however, two pieces of this Families First Coronavirus Response Act that are important for the businesses that we work with. One of them is a paid time off plan or a paid sick time. The other is a paid family and medical leave time. Both of those have pretty important parameters that need to be adhered to. And again, the intent and purpose of this particular act was to make sure that the employees who were working at small businesses were not going to be penalized for either having to take care of children or having to take care of other family members, or even caregiving to others, so not necessarily families. There are 6 components to the family leave time, to the family sick time that are pretty important. So if you as an employee, or if your employees are subject to a governmental quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19, the employee has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to COVID-19 concerns. The employee is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and is seeking a diagnosis. They are caring for an individual subject to a governmental quarantine, isolation order, or healthcare provider recommendation. They are caring for an eligible son or daughter under the age of 18 if the school or place of care has been closed due to COVID-19 concerns, or if the employee is experiencing any other substantially similar condition as specified by the HHS secretary. So that last one is up for a little bit of debate, and so we're not going to talk so much about that one right now. But the paid sick time allows for an employee who's been working with your business for at least 30 days to qualify for sick time if it is COVID-19 related. So in order to be eligible for that sick time, they will need to they would need to provide you with documentation that they are either seeking a diagnosis, have been diagnosed with, or they are in an area that is under a mandatory quarantine. Likewise, if their son or daughter or somebody that they are caring for is needing support from you or needing support from an employee, they would also be eligible for sick time. It is 80 hours of sick time and is subject to the documentation, as I mentioned before. So if somebody needs to be taking time off in order to care for a sick a son or daughter, or a sick son or daughter, or themselves are sick, they need to be providing you with some documentation of that quarantine or of that illness. I know that the medical system right now is under a lot of stress, but in order for you to qualify for the tax benefits, which we will get to in a few moments, you have to have some kind of substantiated information. What we are hearing is that if it is to care for a sick son, if it's to care for a son or daughter whose childcare is closed or whose school is closed, official notification from the school district, from the daycare center, all of that would be fine. If you needed to care for somebody who is sick, you need to have the diagnosis of the person who is sick. So that's 80 hours. It is paid for by the business. The business is responsible for actually writing the check and would be getting future tax credits. So we'll get to that in just a moment. The second part of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is an emergency family and medical leave. And this is to provide somebody with job security if they need to either not work or step away to care for somebody and can no longer fulfill the obligations of the job. So it is to protect their job. On a secondary level, there is some compensation associated with that you as a employer are obligated to provide. And again, it is compensated for with some tax credits. The emergency family leave is a 12-week all-in bucket. The first 2 weeks of that time period is unpaid. Now, an employee can choose to use company-provided paid time off if you as a company provide that to them. In many cases, the emergency sick leave and the emergency family leave can run concurrently, and so they could qualify for sick leave primarily, and then you're also starting the emergency family medical leave at that same time. And then after 2 weeks of emergency unpaid leave, which they could be receiving paid sick time for, it would go into 10 weeks of a 2/3 rate of pay. The same situations are pretty clear. If they need to be caring for somebody who is ill, it is the same scenario. So a son or daughter who is not able to go to school or whose place of care has closed, if they are caring for someone else who is sick, if they are under a quarantine, all of those particular scenarios would qualify one for the unpaid leave. If you happen to have, for many of the businesses that we work with, we are definitely service oriented, and as a result, there's not a lot of at-home work that can happen if you are a painter or a roofer. But if you do happen to have people who are working from home, if they are either office personnel, salespeople, maybe some of your executive level, people who are on the management team, if they are able to telework and can do some working from home and also do have people at home that they're needing to provide for, the leave can be intermittent, which means that somebody could be working an hour on, an hour off, an hour on, an hour off, and you would need to provide them with the time that they were not able to work because of that caring for somebody else in a paid way. So just in a nutshell, and of course, if you have any questions about it, please do feel free to speak with one of us about it. I wanna hit how you would be receiving the compensation for this. So because of course, the point of this particular act, and this was well before the CARES Act was even written or the PPP was even a glimmer in somebody's idea, this was designed so that you as a business owner were not going to be impacted. And so you would be eligible to get tax credit. So this is if you are filing for your taxes on a quarterly basis, anything that you would be paying, you would be tracking these hours separately and filing for a tax credit based on that. If for some reason the number or the dollar amount exceeds what you would be paying, you can then also file for reimbursement for that. So for example, if you pay $4,000 in combined sick and family leave dollars and your tax bill is only $3,000, you can file for that $1,000 difference and receive that back in. Very important to note that you cannot use this tax credit and the PPP payroll forgiveness at the same time. That's double dipping. So you can, if you are paying somebody for their sick time through this Families First Coronavirus Response Act, you can receive future tax credit off it, or you can take the full value of what you would pay them out of your PPP. So important, really important to make sure that you are not double dipping. As I mentioned before, part of getting that tax forgiveness will be providing the appropriate documentation. So please do make sure that you are collecting doctor's notes, paperwork for people whose schools or places of care have closed down. Make sure that you're getting any quarantine information because you will need to provide that as supporting paperwork for any tax forgiveness that you receive. I wanted to give you a couple of interesting examples of how this can work. We had a client contact us, somebody on their team, somebody's wife gave birth to a baby in February, and once he had heard that there was the COVID-19 was going to have an impact in his community, he elected to stay home with his wife and child and not expose himself to the COVID-19. That is not, I mean, excuse me, yes, to the COVID-19. That is not somebody who would qualify for either of these two plans. This person self-elected to stay home. Now I mean, there are other things that you could do and could consider, whether it was to furlough him or to lay him off, but he would not qualify because the first piece of it is that it happened before April 1st. And the second piece of it was that it was he self-chose to quarantine and did not receive any doctor's information indicating that he should. We've also had clients ask us about people who maybe were diagnosed before that April 1st date and who were then still out after that April 1st date. And my suggestion there is to document the time and make sure that you are paying appropriately from April 1st. In many cases in our businesses, there is a paid time off policy. And so you could use your personal paid time off to supplement then what would be a government mandated paid sick time. We've also had clients ask if, given that they are going to be receiving PPP dollars, if they could pay the sick leave until they receive the PPP. And it's important that you make sure that you are not double dipping, that if you are paying somebody this Families First Corona Relief Act dollars as of April 1st, and you receive PPP dollars on April 20th, that there is a very clear distinction in those two time frames. You cannot double dip. That's going to be pretty important. And I know that the PPP is looking very carefully at potential fraud. The last thing I want to make sure is that everybody knows that on the Department of Labor website, there is a page where you can get temporary posters that outline these programs. So if you happen to be in an area of the country that is not shut down and you are operating either at a reduced level or business as usual, these are required posters. And so I would encourage you to make sure you're going to that Department of Labor website and finding out what those posters are. There are 2 of them, and you need to make sure that they are hung in your place of work or business. We do also have all of this information on our internal website that Molly has created, and so the links are on there as well. Please feel free to look at those, make sure you've got them up. So I wanted to thank everybody for your time. I wanted to keep this nice and tight. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Other than that, I hope that you have a great day, and thanks very much.